Before we begin, thank you very much to... Give me a second on this one. Thank you very much to Lookout Bumblebee 2018. There appears to be a Rise of the Beast 2023 for joining the Patreon campaign. You've got the... okay, you're definitely in the running for the most nonsensical title that I've ever had to read off. It's funny, I actually had to go look at my Patreon list in order to do the new credits, to update the credits at the end of the videos, and the names, the joke names, are so long that it actually pushes all the information off the side of the webpage and I can't read it. This is super, super weird. So maybe the joke names are good. Maybe keep them shorter. Maybe keep them a little bit shorter than that. And I also got to throw in, I'm going to throw in a quick reminder that we are nearing the end of the month, which means almost time for the monthly Q&A. Please go check out my previous Q&A video and leave a question for me there. It can be literally anything. It doesn't have to be Transformer based, as long as it's YouTube friendly, okay? And friendly by my standards, so I will not answer anything, gross or overly serious, okay? Just try to keep it fun and try to keep it on brand, right? So, we are doing another Patreon requested video today. This is the Here's 10 that is on my list, and it's about Generation 2 toys. And when coming up with a list like this, you are immediately thrown into, how do I actually do this? So, there's two caveats to this. One, do I include Generation 1 toys? Because half of Generation 2 is recycled toys from Generation 1. And my ultimate decision is yes, I should keep it sparing, and I should keep it just to the ones that stand out the most, and the ones that are still comparable to the good G2 toys that also came out. But I should not put priority on them. So that was my first decision. Decision 2 was, do I include the Euro G1 stuff that was blended into Generation 2 in Europe? And the ultimate decision there is I decided to keep it to worldwide releases. And nothing that was in a vague territory, strictly things that are Generation 2. So that's the consensus I came up with. I'm not sure it's the best way of concluding this, but it's what I've got. And this is a tricky list to come up with, but I hope the requester enjoys this. So here we go. Here are the top 10 toys from the Generation 2 toy line, and we are going to start with something that is a little bit familiar because it is a reused G1 toy, and it's not the only one of its type that came out, but I definitely think it's the better of the two. So let's talk about G2 Ramjet for just a second. So for starters, the G1 Seeker mold, yes, although it is very part-formy in some parts, I still think it is genuinely a really nice toy. I like the variety and option it has in wing placement, head design, accessory loadout. For something that is reused over and over and over again, it definitely has a lot of things you can do with it in order to make each different Seeker or Jet feel a little bit more unique from each other. So it's kind of got a versatility to it that I like. But also that color scheme. Oh, the color scheme on this guy is so good. Like the light blue and the purple work really well. If this was given a completely new name, I would absolutely buy this, literally and figuratively, as a brand new Seeker character. All right, and it's such a good color scheme that one day, far after this toy's original release, we are going to see another purple and light blue Seeker emerge, and we're going to spend years being confused that it is not based on G2 Ramjet, it is based on Overlord, which is where the designers of animated Slipstream say they drew the comparison. Nevertheless, it's a really cool color scheme, and it is one of those upgraded G1 toys with new missiles, and I believe new missiles, because those aren't the G1 missiles, and it comes with a voice box, it comes with a little sound effect box. I actually kind of liked upgrading old toys with the sound effect box. Thought it was neat. So yeah, purely for color scheme and still being a fairly solid toy, I am going to give at least one Seeker the nod in this list. Generation 2 had a ton of gimmick toys. It was the time of trying out different little things that they could do with their figures, whether that was like rotor gimmicks or watercolor change or like water changing gimmicks. So those are all fine and dandy, but I'm looking for something that's a little bit more structurally interesting as far as a gimmicky toy in Generation 2. And for that, we're going to go to Roadblock, who would eventually be an auto roller out of Beast Wars 2 in Japan, where actually a lot of the unreleased versions of these came out as well. So this guy, it's a big bruiser of a toy. So for starters, I just like the overall look. I mean, it's very Constructicon, but I do like using the big shovel as the chest. I think that works. And out of all of these auto formers, this one definitely turns out the best. But the auto forming actually works really, really well. You push it forward, like if you have the switch flipped correctly, you roll it forward, rises up into robot mode, no problem. Roll it backward, goes back down into vehicle mode, no problem. It's a whole complicated gearing system, but it actually works. It actually works really, really well. It's actually kind of fun. You know, in an age right now where auto forming is a really common thing to find, this is the progenitor. This is one of the first times that we had something that worked that way. We had flip changers, all that, and jump starters, battle chargers. But this is the first time where it's just a full gear system and not spring-loaded, and it forms a far nicer robot than any of those ever did. So I'm giving the nod to him. If we're going to recognize just like purely gimmick figures in Generation 2, I'm going to make that one my choice to represent them. One thing about this list is there's a lot of figures that are very similar to each other, or I could interchange one or the other. Technically, I could interchange Starscream and Ramjet at number 10, but Ramjet just has a more unique color scheme to him. But in a lot of these cases, it's just a matter of preference. The toys excel for the same reasons. It's just a matter of which one of this subgroup do you actually like the most. In this case, we are talking about the Laser Cycles, Road Rocket, and Road Pig. This one is very much up in the air which one you prefer. For me, I kind of like Road Pig better. The overall design of it, I feel like works a little bit better, and I can play with it a little bit more easily than I could Road Rocket. I'm not a big fan of these these gigantic wheels hanging off the shoulders, and how leggy he is. Like it's a weirder design for me. But I like the Road Pig. And also, this is where we get into the light-up gimmicks that are actually kind of neat. On these, it's the suspension, like the side piece on the motorcycle that lights up. Or I guess on Road Rocket it is. On Road Pig, it's the exhaust pipe. Still cool, though. And the laser effect actually works pretty well on these. This is also where we start getting into the higher range of articulation that Generation 2 was starting to experiment with. Keep in mind, 90s toys around this time were still very much simple figures. Though, when a Spider-Man toy had extra elbows and knees and they emphasized the articulation level as a gimmick, that's kind of the first time articulations ever had any importance. So this is when Transformers started to do the same thing. So yeah, they're kind of articulate boys and they aren't too bad a figure themselves, and I like the light-up gimmick. It's a matter of taste, which one you want better. But yeah, for me, I'm going to give the nod to the pig. It's not the only light-up laser-designed character that we had, though. There's an entire other subgroup of them that we are going to discuss as well, and these are laser rods, the hot rod-based cars. Now, aside from the fact that the hot rods are just a different and unique style of vehicle that G1 really didn't touch all of that much, you're also incorporating the laser gimmick in a different way. And again, I could pick any of the 4 that came out, except for Electro, who could shatter in an instant because he's almost all gold plastic. No, I'm giving the nod to Jolt. One, because I feel like he is the best structured of them. He looks the most solid and most well-balanced as far as robot mode, aesthetic, and design details go. But also, I just think he looks the nicest. I like this kind of dark pink and blue flame job that he's got going on. This is again a set of characters that emphasizes articulation for one of the first times ever. These guys were very articulated for their time. They even had the G.I. Joe rubber waist things, so you had that to work with. That does mean it can break down. It does mean that it can break. But if yours is intact or you've repaired yours, it's a really nice and fairly articulated car transformer for back in the day. Their laser gimmick was the weapon that they carried. In this case, swords. And they, again, worked really well. Light up swords are always kind of a cool thing on a transformer. So yeah, laser rods get a nod of approval from me. I like the style of them. I like the overall look. The robot modes are generally pretty good. And yeah, I like using the lasers as laser swords. Yeah, because I grew up on Star Wars too. So laser swords for everybody. At this point in history, Hasbro is very much aware of how popular Optimus Prime is. After the debacle that was killing him off in the movie, I'm pretty sure they know they had to just keep running Optimus Prime as their lead hero. So it's not going to be a surprise that Optimus got the lion's share of all of the good toys. So let's talk about the hero figure for starters. This is the first time an Optimus Prime toy actually had the full full-size vehicle front and rear section turning into one robot ever, without having like a super mode gimmick applied to it like the Power Master version. And it works fairly well. It's also a unique color scheme for him. Even today, the white and yellow is not a normal look for Optimus Prime, even though in the robot mode, it does a pretty good job of emulating his traditional designs while still giving him an upgrade. He's also from that time where you had the air launch gimmick, which takes up, a good chunk of his rear section and on his arm as well. And you can also tell they really emphasized articulation on this figure. Now, unfortunately, there is some balancing issues that I've always had with this version. I had it as Destructicon Scourge. And yeah, it does have some balancing issues. It can be mitigated though. And overall, if you just got it in hand and you're playing with it, makes for a fun little time. Like, it is not bad. And if you really like that air launch missile thing, which I admit, slamming your fist on the table and watching something fly off that isn't going to cost you a lot of money, it's actually fun. So yeah, I like the overall design. I like the overall look. It's very different for Optimus Prime. Even today, it really hasn't been properly replicated. So it is not bad to see. Not too bad, Optimus Prime. We'll hear from you more a little bit later. Here's another situation of a tie, but not because the toys are so, well, technically because the toys are so similar, but this one really, really depends on your preferences. And you're going to understand why when I show you that at number 5, we're going to be talking about Megatron. So the first attempt at Megatron completely redefined the character. They weren't allowed to use him as a gun anymore, so here he is the very first time he is a tank. In the very traditional G2 color scheme of green and purple camo that really can't blend in anywhere, but hey, it's the signature of G2, let's give it a little bit of credit. So considering this is one of the first brand new design Transformers in a long time for Hasbro in America, it's not too bad. I mean, of course, it's stiff. It's 4 points of articulation. It leans far more into Generation 1 tropes than it does what G2 is generally known for. But it's a big, fun, solid toy. You've got a really good launching mechanic that can hold multiple missiles at once. So you can just like rapid fire them as you will. And he's got the built-in electronics, which are, infamous. Megatron attack. It redefined the character. It gave us something brand new to do with Megatron, now that his original alt mode, not really the best suited, not really legal to make in America anymore, but also, it actually kind of feels more thematic for Transformers. The big villain leader turning into a gun that one of his minions has to use. Let's admit, gun Megatron might be classic, but it's not the most logical thing. It's tied, however, with the hero version of Megatron. This one is far smaller, but it emphasizes articulation. It doesn't have electronics, it's got the air launch missile instead. It does have balancing issues as well, but it's far easier to play with. So, and of course, the decos are very, very different from each other. Purple and black camo instead. They're generally the same toy, really. Structurally, they are. It's just a matter of what preference do you have. Do you want the electronics or do you want the articulation? Do you want the size? What size? Large or small? So in this one, I could go either way. I like both of these toys for the same reasons, but I feel both of them also have flaws that hold each other down. So considering they are so similar to each other, yes, I'm cheating a little bit and I'm putting them in a tie for 5th place. But overall, yeah, I think they're really comparable to each other. They're both nice. They're both decent for what they do. And yes, Megatron does rule, after all. If G2 has a legacy as far as toy engineering goes, it is the advent of ball joints. Now, there are very, very, very limited situations in the 80s where Transformers and even GoBots would go to ball joints for some point of articulation or engineering, but it was an extremely rare process. But in G2, it flourished, and it created these transforming robot toys that had spectacular articulation, not only for the time, but for the series they were in. And nothing emphasizes that more than the Cyberjets. Again, this is kind of where you could go whichever. There's 6 different Cyberjets, and you could name each and any one of them as your particular jet in this slot. I like the color scheme and the overall head sculpt design of Jetfire most, so I'm going with Jetfire for this one, but you're free to pick whoever you'd like. I also really like the fact that they had another thing that was kind of unique at the time, which was the pressure-launched missiles, because you can see one of his arms is a twisted claw in order to actually accommodate that gimmick. And then the other side gets to store all the extra missiles, which is actually kind of a cool look to have both firing off. And then, yeah, it's the exact same launching system that's at the top of the vehicle mode, which means you can't remove it from the toy, but it's always available, which is a really nice thing. They transform really well. They are small, playable, and again, highly articulated for their time. And they did a good job. You've got a stealth bomber, you've got a reverse wing, you've got tiger stripes, you've got crazy colors, you've got standard normal colors. So they had a really good run of variety. They kind of all feel like the same toy, but appearance-wise, they're really good about giving you different flavors. So you could have your Cyberjet and the one that you connected to the most. Like I said, I like Jetfire's best. However, it could have been any of them. And this is the toy that a lot of people point to in G2 when they say this is when Transformers started getting really good. It was the articulation level that ball joints enabled, and the standardization of everyone gets a missile launcher, even the small guys. So yeah, hats off to the Cyberjet. Well earned 4th place. You can't keep a good bot down. I said I was going to be very limited in my Generation 1 picking when it came to this list, but of course there are some toys that are just too good not to acknowledge, and that takes us back to the original Optimus Prime, now refreshed for Generation 2. They were actually really smart. For some of the designs, for some of the G1 toys brought back for G2, they got insane with the color schemes, like Ramjet, like the Combaticons. For Optimus Prime, they were very much aware of what the assignment was. Keep it classic. The only change to the main bot's deco is a little bit of the red and blue tones are different, and he's got an Autobot, literally a label, tampoed on his leg. But that's generally it. It's everything else where they decided they could play around. Obviously, the black trailer, which I always thought looked really, really cool. Maybe not practical when a robot in disguise has his name splattered across the side in bright white lettering. That might not be the best of choices. Okay, we admit this. But the black doesn't look bad. And I love that they threw in more. I mean, it's already, G1 Optimus Prime is already a pretty well-loaded set of accessories and toys. It's got the playset feature that, in Generation 2, nothing else really had that. It wasn't a thing. So this was the only way to get that play value in G2. And then you've got the infamous voice box, which, give them credit, they found a way of incorporating that into both vehicle and robot mode with only minor remolding changes needed. And it did give you some electronic sound effects, and it gave you the first time we ever heard an Optimus Prime toy speak. I am Optimus Prime. Granted, it's not the most exciting thing, but back then it was. Back then it was super cool to have Optimus announce himself. So yeah, between that, the extra missile launchers, and just the overall fact that it's still just a really solid toy. Like, even for G1, not bad articulation, really clean robot mode that actually does look like the character, which is something that you can't say about a lot of G1 toys, but you could here. So I think it made a really good one to re-release, not only because it's, you know, the first chance America had of getting the original Optimus Prime since like 1985, but also, yeah, it's still just kept its time. I mean, it's something of a timeless toy. And yeah, it was nice to see it again, even if you had a few new colors to it. But that's not the Optimus Prime we know from Generation 2. It is a Optimus Prime, but the Optimus Prime is a completely new mold because we needed to update, upgrade, get into the 90s as far as toy engineering goes. Thus, we have Laser Optimus Prime. Once again, going with that laser sword gimmick. However, we have put in so much more, so much more. It is a brand new Optimus Prime from the ground up. The first time the character had ever truly been reinvented. He's not rocking like this primarily red chest anymore. He's got a different layout to his robot mode and a different silhouette. He's a long-nosed cab this time, and he's using a tanker trailer instead of his traditional carrier. This was a pretty big overhaul. Now, it made sense, obviously, because it's still Prime in a truck, but it's a pretty big departure from how he looked originally. But look at all the things you get. You get a very high standard of articulation, and it's all universal joint instead of ball joints like the smaller toys. So you get this nice range of motion, but also the security of the joints being able to hold poses and not wear down so easily. Then you have the new trailer. Now, instead of this big play set and this repair bay looking thing, oh no. Prime is loaded for war. Like, he's got the disc launcher, which is a really cool gimmick, actually, that works in both vehicle and base mode. He's got the big rack of missile launchers. He's got the gun tower. It's a pretty big departure from just like, oh, just a little repair bay, a little roller rolling around. No. Heavy assault platform. It's kind of appropriate for the 90s attitude behind hero characters when you think about it. And just overall, like, it's a fantastic toy. Even toys, like even Optimus Primes that came after this, we're still kind of struggling to be as good as this toy was. I mean, I would even put this up against toys that came much later, like Classics Optimus Prime. This is still a better toy than that one is, and I loved Classics Optimus Prime. So this one, yeah, for all that Generation 2 felt kind of behind the curve because it's 80s toys released in the 90s, this made up for a lot of it. And if this was the norm for Generation 2, it probably would have survived a lot longer. So if two different Optimus Prime toys failed to claim the #1 rank in Generation 2's toy line, who was it? Who can actually be called the best G2 toy there is? Well, in order to come to that, we have to cheat a little and not talk about one toy, we have to talk about two. But in this case, it's because there was no way to buy them individually. You had to buy them together. Let's talk about Dreadwing and Smokescreen. This set, oh my god, this set. So ignore the fact that they renamed they took an Autobot car's name and stuck it on a Decepticon jet. All right, the name dumping's funny that way, but the toy itself is pretty fantastic. Smokescreen is a very different style of transformation for a jet, even though it ends up with more traditional stylings with the cockpit and wing placements. It was an engineering scheme so different and good that they would eventually reuse it for Energon Starscream. No, they are not a retool. It is the original engineering from Smokescreen reused to make a brand new toy. We are familiar with that, but back then, that was a really weird thing for them to do. Nevertheless, the original toy is pretty fantastic. The two-tone blue color scheme works really well. The hits of red come through really nicely. And the 2 giant missile launchers that he can arm himself with aren't bad either. And then there's the partner Dreadwing. So, number 1, big, beefy boy. Big, beefy boy. You have a stealth bomber mode, which is like really wide. Like, it was a pretty big toy for its day. And that massive missile launcher that you just crank the back and it fires the missiles one by one. It's a super cool gimmick. Then you can work in the fact that there's a tank mode. Dreadwing has a tank mode. There's a combination mode for their 2 vehicles because Smokescreen can dock inside Dreadwing. Oh, and by the way, these are the later G2 toys that were loaded with articulation. All around, an absolutely amazing set with a lot of play value and a lot of things you can do with it. The toy is so good, they kept reusing it. In RID, you could buy it in more military green colors. You could buy it in Robot Masters out of Japan in a new style of blue. And there's a few other ways to have gotten it too. If you were in the Ohio area, you might have been in the test market that got to have this set in black as Starscream and Megatron. But that's a very, very limited run. So that's the rare one. Not only is this one of the best G2 toys there is that version that also makes it one of the most desirable Generation 2 toys there is as well. So there you go. That's my choice for number 1. And yeah, I had to talk about 2 to do it. But hey, it's a 2-pack. It counts. And that is the list. And I'm well aware there's going to be people who disagree with me. This is a very subjective series to talk about. Whether you include the Generation 1 redecos, whether you prefer all the weird, kind of off the beat gimmick toys like the color changers and things like that. Everyone in G2 is going to have a different focus and a different reason for why these toys are good or not. And whether or not this is a fair list is going to be completely up in the air. But I tried to be as fair as I could, given what the toy line is. So, as always, feel free to tell me in the comments below how wrong I am, because I know there's someone out there who's going to say Laser Prime should have been number 1. And that's completely valid, and I kind of want to hear about it. So, thank you guys for watching. I will see you next time.
I'm like, I think you guys got this. I will back away, and I will see you all later.
You've got this handled.
Alaffi's like, really? You're not gonna help me? Like, it's fine now.
It's like these disgusting creatures breathing down my neck, and you're all just like, I believe in you. You got this.
All right, you seem to have this. 5 minutes.